The oppressive humidity of Georgia persisted despite the air conditioner operating at maximum capacity. 10 years have elapsed since my marriage. Logan, it has been 10 years since we exchanged vows beneath a scorching July heat, reminiscent of today. The sole warmth I experienced was the disquieting intensity of an illicit desire. Logan's nephew David came a few weeks prior, just graduated, and seemed poised for success. He was intended to be a temporary house visitor until he established himself and secured employment in Atlanta. I had not considered it further. Although David had consistently been a subdued, nearly imperceptible figure at family gatherings, courteous yet aloof, he suddenly exhibited a notable transformation. He had grown taller and wider, and his youthful features had evolved into something stunning. He isolated himself in the guest room, dispatching resumes and making phone calls. Our interactions were infrequent. A brief greeting in the kitchen, a nod in the corridor, and I was similarly distant, occupied with my own life and routine to provide significant attention to him. Balancing my responsibilities as a graphic designer, maintaining household order, and nurturing the vitality of my marriage. My days were plenty until they arrived. On that oppressive Sunday afternoon, Logan was golfing with pals as a tempest raged outside, reflecting the inner agony I was experiencing. I entered the living room to retrieve a book, and there he was, reclined on the sofa, engrossed in a novel. He glanced up at my entrance, and his stare remained for a moment too prolonged, revealing a hint of the unforeseen. A dangerous connection occurred between us. His stormy, sea-colored eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that momentarily stole my breath. I attributed it to my imagination. However, the sentiment endured, prompting David to make more frequent appearances, frequently accompanied by a credible justification. Seeking guidance on a job application that included assistance with dinner, his praise increased in frequency. "Your clothing is stunning on you. Aunt Lily, your laughter is exquisite." The atmosphere was charged with unarticulated anxiety in Logan's presence, who remained unaware and increasingly worked late. Frequently, his advertising firm was pursuing a new client, and he was engrossed in it as the evening prolonged. Before me was an expanse, devoid of life, imbued with the quiet presence of my husband's nephew. Each night, the boundary between us became increasingly indistinct, necessitating our caution. Although we never made physical contact or said explicit words, the quiet resonated with unexpressed longing one evening as I prepared supper, the aroma of garlic and herbs permeating the kitchen. I was preparing Logan's preferred chicken piccata, although my mind was occupied with thoughts of my husband David, who entered and offered assistance. He stood in proximity, and I sensed the warmth emanating from his body. Our fingers grazed as I moved past him. A chopping board and a surge of electricity coursed through me. This was not mere flirting. It was a conflagration about to ignite. To initiate, I expressed my gratitude. I controlled my voice to a breathless whisper. "Your assistance in this environment has been invaluable." He displayed that effortless smile, which had consistently appeared so naive. He said that it was inconsequential. "I enjoy the company of those with a deep, husky voice. You, Aunt Lily, found the atmosphere dense, rendering it difficult. To inhale, we were precariously balanced on the brink of a precipitate, and I recognized with alarming certainty that a single misstep would plunge us into the abyss. Hesitated. It seemed like transgressing a boundary. Although it was only a film, I did not wish to appear paranoid or uncomfortable, hence I acquiesced. We positioned ourselves on the sofa, the television first emitting an unsettling luminescence throughout the room. Focusing on the film, a frivolous romantic comedy that Logan would have despised, was rather simple, but as time elapsed, my awareness intensified. The presence of David adjacent to me, the contact of his arm on mine as he extended for the remote, the gentle cadence of his breathing, the faint aroma of him. The film elicited a profound sense of unease midway through its duration. He moved nearer, causing my heart to rush, and I admonished myself to rise and fabricate an explanation. I intended to exit the room, however, I remained stationary as the distance between us diminished. Although his actions were not explicitly improper, the intensity of the situation was undeniable. "I genuinely appreciate you being here, Aunt Lily," he suddenly remarked, his voice low and husky. "I have been feeling very adrift recently, amidst graduation and the endeavor to ascertain my future. Your presence instills a sense of reassurance that everything will be well." I was uncertain how to reply. His remarks conveyed honesty and a vulnerability that surprised me. I experienced an intense want to reassure him that all would be okay, although I was acutely aware that I was precariously close to a perilous situation. "You have endured considerable challenges, David," I remarked. "It is customary for me to select my words with precision." He appeared unsure at that moment, gazing at me with dark, piercing eyes. "It transcends mere uncertainty," he remarked. Gently, "I am at a loss for words, although I have never experienced such feelings for anybody prior," causing my breath to hitch in my throat. This was the moment I had simultaneously feared and awaited. I saw the necessity to terminate it to establish distance before it escalated. However, I remained immobilized. Immobile and mute, David positioned his face only inches from mine. My heart raced as the atmosphere between us crackled with tension. Although he did not touch me, the proximity felt more intimate than any physical contact could provide. His eyes sought mine, imploring for a reassurance I could not comprehend. Suddenly, a loud clap of thunder reverberated through the house, causing the lights to flicker. I leaped in surprise, which appeared to disrupt the enchantment. I rose suddenly, my entire body quaking. "I require verification on a matter," I vocalized unexpectedly in the kitchen. Unsteady, even to my own perception, David blinked. Initially taken aback, but subsequently acquiesced. "Certainly, I will pause the film." I hurried out of the living room, my thoughts racing. What was I doing? And how had I let the situation in the kitchen escalate to this point? I clutched the counter's edge, attempting to regulate my breathing. I needed to reestablish control over the situation before it deteriorated entirely. Yet as I stood there attempting to compose myself, I could not dispel the apprehension that the delicate boundary we had meticulously maintained was on the verge of being breached, and I was uncertain whether I possessed the fortitude to prevent it or if I even desired to do so. I lingered in the kitchen longer than required, feigning concern about little matters, reorganizing the kitchenware and cleaning an already immaculate counter, anything to evade returning. Upon entering the room, my thoughts surged in several directions, with contradictory emotions: guilt, dread, exhilaration, and an unfamiliar longing whirling within my chest. How had I let this occur repeatedly over the years? Crucially, what actions was I intending to undertake? What actions was I planning to take about this matter? A question reverberated in my head as I traversed the kitchen, the aroma of cooling chicken piccata taunting my distress. Ultimately, I realized I could not conceal myself indefinitely. Inhaling deeply, I examined myself and proceeded to walk. Upon re-entering the living room, I found David seated on the couch where I had left him, his posture rigid. Yet, he glanced up at my arrival, presenting a faint, somewhat contrite grin. He spoke softly, expressing regret for maybe causing discomfort to Aunt Lily. I did not want for his comments to linger between us, and I realized that he was anticipating some form of comfort. There were indications that all was okay, although the reality was that I harbored doubts about the possibility of things being all right following this. Nevertheless, I could not overlook the reality that we were both positioned on the brink. The inquiry was whether one of us would retreat or succumb. "We must exercise caution, David," I ultimately articulated, selecting my words with care. "We are both in a challenging situation, and it is easy to misinterpret matters." He gazed at his hands, his countenance inscrutable. I am aware that he mumbled. "I did not want to complicate matters. Rather, I have consistently felt that I can communicate with you as though you comprehend me in a manner that no one else can." The admission surprised me. I had not comprehended the profundity of his emotions, and the gravity of his remarks awakened something within me. Yet, I could not permit myself to contemplate that this was inappropriate. We both recognized it, and I wanted to terminate this. Before proceeding forward, I stated, "David, you are Logan's nephew. My resolve is stronger now that this is no longer feasible. This situation is unacceptable. He did not reply promptly. He gazed at me for what seemed like an age, as if probing for something within my eyes, then gradually nodded, acknowledging the reality we both recognized. However, it had not yet been articulated verbally. "You are correct," he stated, his voice just above a whisper. "Apologies." A sense of relief enveloped me. However, it was swiftly succeeded by an unforeseen surge of melancholy. A portion of me desired him to contest, to dispute, to affirm that our connection transcended a mere transient error. However, I recognized that such a notion would be disingenuous. We lingered in silence for a time, the tension palpable yet now infused with an awareness that we faced a pivotal decision. In that hushed interval, with the film still halted on the screen and the rain persistently tapping against the windows, "The decision has led me to conclude that I will retire for the night," said, ultimately rising and evading his sight. "It is late, and we have both experienced a lengthy day." David nodded once again, remaining silent as I turned and ascended the steps. I sensed his gaze upon my back. However, I refrained from turning around. I could not, even if I desired, maintain the delicate control I had succeeded in restoring. I reclined in bed that night, gazing at the ceiling while my thoughts recapitulated each occurrence. The events of the evening were strange, akin to a cinematic scenario, instead of a personal experience. Despite its authenticity, I saw the necessity of relinquishing it for the preservation of my marriage. To save my sanity, I had to suppress this before it escalated. However, sleep eluded me. Notwithstanding the circumstances, I remained convinced that the narrative between David and me was not yet concluded. The days following that night felt peculiar, as if I were existing in a parallel reality where the surface appeared unchanged, yet everything felt altered beneath. David and I avoided one another to the greatest extent possible whenever our paths intersected. The atmosphere was charged with unvoiced sentiments, characterized by strained grins and uncomfortable silence, recalling that evening in the living room. Logan remained blissfully unaware, as he was still engrossed in his task. His nocturnal habits were a persistent observation I made. I detest his absence, not just for the loneliness it engenders but also because it complicates my efforts to evade David. One afternoon, while tending to the garden under the relentless sun, I was weeding the flower beds in an attempt to divert my attention from the internal conflict. Upon hearing footsteps behind me, I turned to see David standing there with an uncertain expression. "May I converse with you, Aunt Lily?" he inquired, and my heart plummeted. I anticipated this occurrence, although I was unprepared. Not at this time. The days subsequent to that intense night in the living room were characterized by a peculiar blend of relaxation and disquieting expectation. David and I engaged in dancing. They exchanged peculiar smiles and awkward discussions, with the unsaid tension palpable in the atmosphere. Each inadvertent contact and transient gaze served as a reminder of the prohibited domain we had almost traversed. Logan remained blissfully unaware. Upon returning from his vacation, his thoughts were still consumed with work, and he re-engaged with our routine with an eagerness that seemed jarring, like to a swimmer plunging into water. Returning to tranquil surroundings, oblivious to the tumultuous currents below, David appeared more subdued than customary. He occupied the majority of his time outside the home, either attending job interviews or frequenting a local cafe to refine his CV. A portion of me felt relief from the distance. It afforded me the opportunity to contemplate what had nearly transpired, attempting to persuade myself that it was merely a fleeting lapse in judgment. However, another part of me, the aspect I was reluctant to confront, yearned for him, longed for the intensity of our connection, despite it never crossing into the physical realm, and I found myself solitary in the house once more. Logan was working late, and David had departed. I believed I was alone, seated in the living room, absorbed in contemplation when I heard the front door softly click. My heart ceased momentarily. David had returned. I was uncertain of my expectations or desires. All I recognized was his unpreparedness for another encounter. Just as I was ready to ascend the stairs, David materialized at the doorway, his countenance inscrutable. "We must converse, Aunt Lily." He spoke in a quiet yet assertive tone. I nodded, my stomach churning. Despite my awareness of the inevitability of this debate, I had hoped to postpone it slightly. David entered the living room, perched on the edge of the couch as though he were an outsider. I sat opposite him, maintaining a safe distance. The quiet between us was laden with unexpressed thoughts. "I have been contemplating the events that transpired," David eventually said, disrupting the silence. "I believe I must depart," a statement that struck me profoundly. I did not anticipate his request to depart. To what location would he proceed? Was this a consequence of my actions? "I do not wish for you to feel obligated to go," I stated hastily, my voice faltering. "This is your family, David. You need not depart due to what nearly transpired." He completed my sentence, his gaze fixed upon mine. "We are both aware that it is the correct course of action. I cannot remain here feigning that all is okay when it is not. I have complicated matters for you, and I must accept accountability for that." His remarks were profound and contemplative, evoking a constriction in my chest accompanied by shame and an unnamed sentiment. He was correct. Undeniably, his presence in the home had transformed into a ticking time bomb, and we both saw that eventually something would yield. The sole method to alleviate the situation was for one of us to depart. "You are not accountable for everything, David," I stated gently. "We both contributed to this." David trembled. "Perhaps his brain, but I am the one who complicated matters for you. Logan placed his faith in me, and I betrayed that trust." Hearing Logan's name was like a frigid spray of water, a vivid reminder of the guy oblivious to the turmoil occurring within his own household. The weight of humiliation overwhelmed me, and I recognized, despite my desire to revert to our previous state, that David was acting correctly. The reality was that we were unable to. "When are you departing?" I inquired, my voice scarcely audible. "I have a pal in the city." David stated that I would stay with him temporarily till I resolved my issues. "I will inform Logan that it is due to my employment acquisition." In the presence of opportunity, a logical rationale emerges. The departure was unblemished, ensuring Logan remained oblivious to the imminent calamity we almost avoided. Yet, as I listened to David articulate his strategy, I was unable to suppress my thoughts. However, I experienced profound sorrow. We had made the correct decision, yet it still felt like a defeat. "I will miss your presence, David." I was taken aback by the sincerity in my voice. He responded with a faint, melancholic grin. "I will also miss you, Aunt Lily, but this is for the best." We were silent for a brief interval. Both of us recognized that this marked the conclusion of our developing relationship. There would be no theatrical farewell or last-minute revelations, but a silent acknowledgement that this was the appropriate course of action, whatever the pain it caused David. He stood, and I accompanied him to the door as he grasped the doorknob. He halted, orienting himself to confront me one final time. He expressed his desire that you would be well. With a gentle affirmation, I responded, but with uncertainty regarding its veracity. Subsequently, David unlocked the door and exited into the night, forsaking the tension, temptation, and the intricate predicament we had nearly succumbed to. I saw him across the driveway, vanishing into the shadows, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief when Logan returned home later that night. He bestowed a kiss across my cheek. Oblivious to the burden that had just been alleviated from our existence, I returned his grin, cognizant that the near occurrence would remain a clandestine narrative, an untold tale. In the tranquility of our residence, I recognized that we had all evaded a perilous situation, one that might have altered everything. However, as I reclined in bed that night, attuned to Logan's rhythmic breathing next to me, I found myself pondering, what if we had succumbed to temptation? What if we had transgressed that boundary? The inquiries remained unresolved, serving as a reminder of the illicit route we nearly pursued, and as I succumbed to slumber, I recognized that the recollection of David and the almost consummated affair would endure with me eternally.